Senator Smith.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. South Australians are emerging from what has been a really tough summer. For many, the change in the environment in South Australia when borders opened and COVID entered our state has been either personally catastrophic or caused tremendous challenges for themselves, for their work, for their families, for their businesses. It has been a really difficult summer. And it's been made worse by a Prime Minister who once again has failed South Australians in the way he's responded to the pandemic, in the way he's responded to the changes before us, like the changes in this variant, and whether it's been his failure to secure enough rapid antigen tests for Australian workers so they can get back to work, for families, whether it's failure to get jabs in the arms of kids returning to the classroom, for teachers who weren't yet eligible for boosters but needed them to get back to work, to do their work safely, or his government's shocking failure to respond adequately to the crisis in our aged care homes across the country. South Australians, on all of these fronts, feel deeply let down by the Prime Minister. They feel deeply let down by his government. And I don't blame them. It's been a really tough few years, compounded by a really tough summer. And every time they're looking to their Prime Minister to lead, he's not there. He's not holding a hose. He's not getting on with the job of the vaccine rollout. He's not building quarantine. He's not securing the RATs. He's not supporting the early childhood workforce, who are on the front line of this pandemic, but seemingly invisible to the government for so long. Not taking the steps required to fix a crisis of aged care. In fact, his government getting caught up in word games whilst people are dying. South Australians feel failed. They feel let down by this Prime Minister. They're questioning his character. They're questioning his ability to stand up for them when they need him. They're questioning his relationship with the truth. They're questioning whether, when they need their government to step in, whether they'll be there, because on every measure this summer and the years before, they haven't. But beyond these issues, beyond these acute issues, these issues of urgency, there are further failures less seen, less talked about, less spoken about, and I want to use my time today to talk about the impact of the Morrison government's failures on the higher education and further education sector in my home state of South Australia, a sector which feels abandoned by the Morrison government. Now, my state is home to 3 world-class universities and 8 TAFE campuses. There are hundreds of thousands of South Australian men and women, young and old, with talent and potential to develop, but who are being let down by a government which is meant to stand for them, meant to stand for their opportunity, for their aspiration. Now, our universities in South Australia educate around 90,000 students, and when it comes to TAFE, more than 1 million students have learned valuable skills and experience at TAFEs in South Australia since these facilities were established in 1971. And we know in South Australia that higher education is vital to our economic future. We know this because it has been crucial to our success economically as a state. And we know, according to Universities Australia, that university research has added $10 billion to Australia's GDP each year for the last 30 years, $10 billion. And it's not just big universities in our cities we are talking about, it's our regional economies too. And we know universities contribute $2 billion a year to these economies. They support over 14,000 regional jobs, and before COVID, 120,000 direct full-time jobs nationwide, while supporting a broader 40,000 in the wider economy. Our higher education institutions in South Australia, before COVID, brought in an estimated 10,000 international students each year, with an economic value of $2 billion in 2019. Students who were fundamentally and horrifically let down by the government when the pandemic struck, students who lined up for food, students who relied on our charity sector to support them. Now, we also have university research to thank, of course, for the speedy development of what we know are truly life-saving vaccines that we have come to rely on during this pandemic. We have them to thank for crucial social and cultural ties that bind international students with local students, that build relationships and connections, which have meaning not just to the individuals involved, but to whole communities, whole cities, to our nation. Of course, higher education is more than university. I've spoken about that in this chamber several times before. As important as universities are, it's not the be-all and end-all aspiration for all South Australians. Further education presents incredible opportunities. Further education, like TAFE, like vocational training. But on these fronts, the government has let young South Australians down too. TAFE has a critical role to play in advancing the aspirations of many young people in my state. Indeed, many older people in my state looking to retrain, to reskill, to be ready to adapt flexibly to the jobs of the future as the labour market changes, as opportunity changes. But this government has allowed the pandemic to wreak havoc on our education sector. Rather than supporting them throughout this pandemic, they have been systematically trashing it, as they have done for years. They let their ideology about higher education drive their policy response. It's an ideology they should have left at the door many years ago, but especially during this pandemic, when this sector has been crying out for help, when our economy in South Australia, which has so much to gain from a strong higher education sector, has been crying out for help. The Prime Minister has turned his back on higher education. And when you turn your back on higher education, you don't just turn your back on the researchers within it, on the breakthroughs they could make, on the staff working with it, but you turn your back on the future aspiration of a generation of people for whom that's their ticket to something different, for whom that's their ticket to what they aspire to. How many breakthroughs lost, how many careers lost when you stop our young people furthering their dreams, furthering their education, be it in a university or be it in a TAFE. The government has trashed this sector. They left them high and dry when it came to the wage subsidies. Indeed, in my time in this place, they introduced legislation which had the effect of increasing the cost of university for students, of taking away that opportunity. And these failures of the university sector and of the people who seek this opportunity and this expansion of their own potential come at a time when, for young Australians particularly, opportunities are looking pretty bleak. Young people have been hit by this pandemic disproportionately to other groups in our community, whether it's being forced to drain their super to get by, whether it's their disproportionate involvement in casual and insecure work, which has left them incredibly vulnerable during this pandemic, whether it's other aspects of their dreams or their coming of age which has been affected, their Year 12 studies, their opportunities that we had. And then when you compound an ideological attack on the institutions which offer them that next opportunity, that next step to deliver on their aspiration, well, what an incredible failure of a whole generation of people, and what an incredible failure of all of those people in our community who want to be ready for a changing economy, for the opportunities of a renewable energy revolution, for opportunities like micro-credentialing of the skill sets they need to upgrade or adapt, of nurses wanting to change their qualifications so they can get on the front line of this pandemic, to up their skills, to re-enter the workforce, to come back from retirement. These are the institutions which help deliver it. They help deliver the research which keeps us safe from things like global pandemics. They provide an incredible economic opportunity in my state especially. They forge these cultural ties. They are the ticket to better aspiration for so many people. And this government, this Prime Minister, has failed them, and in doing so, he's failed my state. He's failed our opportunities in South Australia.
Senator Thorpe.